Good evening, everyone. My name is Jada Rupley. I'm the superintendent here at Clackamas ESD. Welcome. Education service districts play the role in connecting and convening schools in our region. This helps us all become stronger and have a bigger impact together on the kids that we serve. Tonight, in that vein, we are hosting this conversation in order to build an early foundation for our shared responsibility as educators and political leaders to provide the best possible public education for Oregon's children. We will surface some of the most pervasive, challenging issues that we're experiencing in our schools in the region, and we have the opportunity to work together. We hope that we can work collaboratively with meaningful solutions, and thank you to each of you for stepping into this conversation. What I would like to do is introduce our room. In the room tonight, we have elected school board members, we have superintendents, we have students, we have parents, and we have educational leaders, and we also have our association and our union leadership with us tonight too. I want to thank the committee members who helped put this together. We have the superintendents Bob Stewart, raise your hand Bob, Ryan Carpenter, Trip Goodall, and Larry Didway. Now I'd like to introduce our facilitator for tonight. Sharon Soliday was a member of the Gladstone School District for 7 years. She finished her last 2 as chair. She's the current chair also of Children First for Oregon. And many of you know that last night there was a groundbreaking event of a children's forum for the governor. So she's been a busy woman this week. So I would like to turn it over to you, Sharon. Take it away.
Thank you, Jada. A couple of quick rules we're going to go by. The first is for the audience, and I'm not even going to turn around because my mic is kind of sick, so don't take that personally. First of all, we're not taking any of your questions, so that might be a big relief to some of us on the panel. But that's also because the forum really is, the agenda is really packed with a lot of content we need to move through tonight. We're also going to ask you to hold your applause. There might be a desire to applaud after you hear a presentation or after a particular candidate presents, but we want to ask you not to do that because we have such an incredible depth of participation here tonight. Thank you, everybody, for being here. That we want to get to as many people as we can, and we do want to still exit at a reasonable hour. We also, lastly, don't want it to feel like a partisan event. We really want to give an opportunity to listen. And so thank you in advance for being respectful of that. As Jada noted, there are serious issues facing our school districts that our leadership cannot ignore. And they've done a phenomenal job tonight of really identifying 4 core areas that you're going to hear about. And I also want to share that as a presenter comes up, there will be slides. You're welcome to try to turn around, like in middle school when you're all boxed in, to see the slides, but their copies are also in your packet. So that will be easier for our candidates and representatives to follow along. Feel free to get those out. And we also are hopeful that this is not the end of the discussion tonight, that this is really just the beginning of here are some things that we need to put front and center, and we'd like the conversation to extend beyond that. And because of that, we're going to be very strict about time. Candidates will have, in the first section, a minute and 30 seconds to respond, because instead of asking you all to introduce yourselves right now, you may notice that we're not. We're going to have a presentation, and then we're going to ask everyone, it's the only question where you're going to, or segment that you're going to be asked, everyone, to first introduce yourself and then answer the question. And there'll be a minute 30 you'll have to do both of those things. Afterwards, and if you want to know in advance where are we starting, who gets to say what, we're going to really keep it exciting and mix it up. We're going to start at one end over here with candidate Olsen. And then we're going to bounce over to the end here, and we're going to go back and forth, so no side of the room has a chance to get a little dreary after their dinner snack. So it's going to keep it hopping. So after that, you're going to have 1 minute on a volunteer basis for sections 2, 3, and 4. If you'd like to say something, just raise your hand like you're back in class, because that's what we can all relate to. And I'll call on someone and do my best with regards to your names. We only have 20 minutes. We may not get to everybody, but we have a timer over here. You'll also see. Every time you see the yellow card, Guy, would you hold the yellow card up so they'll know? That's what it'll look like. The audience will know too, and you'll know. That means you have 30 seconds remaining. When you see the red card, really no one's going to listen anymore. So you might as well take a breath and pause. So let's see, with that, that's our format. And let's see, anything I did not answer? I think that's it. So we're going to, we are doing Facebook Live. So last night at the gubernatorial debate, we were on C-SPAN, which I'm sure had 82 viewers. But Facebook Live, you're going to be all over the place. So this is very exciting. Be sure to smile. And if something isn't clear or I ask a follow-up question, feel free to ask for clarification or defer to somebody else. So, okay, without further ado, we're going to get rolling. The first person we get to hear from is doing a presentation on our most pressing topic, has to do with school funding. Gina Benaloga. Gina, am I saying that correctly? Thank you, Gina. Gina Benaloga. She's a parent at North Clackamas School District, and she's going to be taking a few minutes to share some thoughts, and we encourage your attention. Thank you.
Welcome. Thank you so much. I am a parent of 2 graduates of Milwaukee High School. I am by no means an expert in school funding. However, I'm a passionate volunteer with our district, with our schools for many years, and just have a little bit of information that we like to pass on. Decades of funding erosion due to both declines in corporate tax share and to property tax limitations have crippled Oregon's public education system by causing class sizes to increase, programs to be eliminated, support staffing to be minimized, libraries to close, extracurricular activities to be limited or fee-based, and students to be left with fewer opportunities and less assistance to reach their potential. In 2005, the K-12 budget was 45% of the total state budget of approximately $20 billion. But in 2017, it was 39% of the total budget. This 6% decrease is approximately $14 million less for the North Clackamas School District, a big portion of the $17 million shortfall. Add to this the educational challenges amplified by greater income equality that causes more of our students to live in poverty. In other words, schools are expected to do much more with much less, with students with far greater needs than school budgets are able to accommodate. Due to state funding shortfalls over 10 years, North Clackamas Schools has canceled school days, increased our class sizes, and closed 3 schools. The district has reduced building maintenance, career college guidance counselors, and deferred purchase of learning materials and computers. North Clackamas has still not recovered from the 2008 recession. 20% staff reduction and 14 days of school were cut. In the last 10 years, 46 days of school have been cut for our children. $17 million shortfall equals 170 teachers or 34 days of school. Most likely this will be a combination of both. And since we are gathered here, oops, did I go too far? Since we are gathered from across the county today, just to give you an idea of what this could be looking like in other districts, as in Oregon City. The 2019-20 shortfall of over $1 million to $6 million, depending on the amount of increase in the state school fund. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gina. And thank you, audience. Nice restraint. We're going to start with candidate Yellow. Is it Yellowt? No, Paulson. I apologize. You could just turn that over or something so I don't.
Well, he may show up late.
Okay, we'll be forgiving. Thank you for demonstrating kindness. Okay, candidate Paulson, please, if you would introduce yourself again and answer the question. The question is as follows. What will you do to make this next budget cycle look different from what we've grown accustomed to?
My name is David Polson. I'm running for Senate District 19, which covers Lake Oswego, Westland, Tualatin, Durham, and a portion of South Multnomah County. I have my wife teaches the Pathways program at Lake Oswego High School, if anybody's familiar with that. I have a 24-year-old son with autism. That's been a life-changing event, as you can well imagine. And through that experience, I've learned about how we're changing as how we learn. The children today are much more visual, and we know through the latest in neuroscience that we need to change the way we present information to them in a more visual format. We are also learning from the latest in neuroscience that people have different learning systems, and if we can identify that and present information to them that is practical, meaningful, and relevant to their lives, we can increase their interest, and through that interest, we can grow and improve our literacy rates and decrease our dropout rates and things like that. The reason why I bring that up in terms of funding is because I really don't think that even though I think that we are short funded for our schools, I also think that the fundamental change has to occur in our school district so we can bring in some more transformational leaders that will implement some of these latest cutting edge technologies in education so that we can improve students directly. And it doesn't take any more money to do that. It's just a change in thinking.
Thank you for your time. Candidate Drazen.
Shut up.
Thank you.
Hi. Can everybody hear me? Am I close enough? My name is Christine Drazen, and I am running for House District 39. I am originally from small town Oregon, Klamath Falls, and I'm just going to admit, when I was a kid, we were probably by all standards, including Southern Oregon standards, quite poor. We moved around a lot. My dad didn't always have a stable job. And what's interesting about that life experience, which I know is not unique, and especially in our community, we have lots and lots of kids that bounce around. But what's unique for me about that background and that experience is that when I would go to a new school, the thing that I would find a way to get involved. And for me, it was the arts. I would volunteer and participate in whatever I could, speech, debate, theater, choir, whatever it was. It gave me connections, and it helped root me and anchor me as I went through that kind of a turbulent background. Schools also gave me the foundation to really create a world for myself moving forward and to also find my way into public service at some point. What I have to say, because I have such a brief amount of time to do this, is that I think that moving forward, how things are going to be different in the next cycle, or if we all remember and prioritize that this education thing that we have to fund is one of our few constitutionally mandated requirements, and we need to get there, all of us together. And it cannot continue to be contentious with one party pushing against the other like it's all one person's responsibility. We can do this together.
Thank you. And candidate Galia. Nope. You'll get it right. I'm sorry.
That's all right. My name is Charles Galia.
Galia,
And
thank
I'm
you.
running for this Senate District 20. And let me clarify the question, if I might. You want us to introduce ourselves and solve the funding problem in a minute and a half?
90 seconds, absolutely.
Okay, well, I'll give it my best shot.
Okay.
I was raised in this district, in fact. I went to Clackamas grade school that doesn't exist anymore, and Clackamas High School. And when I was a senior at Clackamas High School, it's also the student body president, and the outgoing superintendent at the time was Vern Duncan. And he had appointed me to these different commissions as a youth representative. And on those commissions, he saw my interest in government and how people were treated by, like, in the Juvenile Services Commission and some other areas. And at the time, I had no, I didn't know what I had a different vision of myself for the future, and I wasn't exactly sure what I would do. But he said, you know, Charles, you might think about getting an advanced degree. And actually, I ended up doing that. And it was probably the few 30 seconds of time that somebody ever spent with me that was probably more transformative in any other way. Solving the budget crisis, I have some solutions that I pointed to in the response that I can go into hopefully at a later point in time.
Thank you. And candidate, this is my age because your name is, we met Grazier Lindsay.
It's right. I'm Elizabeth Gracer Lindsay. I'm running for state representative in House District 39. I have a long history in education, and I come from a family of educators. I was thinking through in what ways I've been involved in education, and I was a longtime student, a graduate student, a professor, a teacher of young kids. I served on a school parent advisory team, and I was a parent of a student athlete. So I really do believe in education and want to see it well-funded and be of a quality nature. It seems that we have an impasse in our legislature where we have different parties pushing for different funding mechanisms and looking deep into different places where funds are all tied up. And I'd like to look at each of those places and use some of my math background to help see where we can find the funds. I also have spent a lot of time talking with my nephew about his experience as a young teacher. He has told me about some of the problems that teachers have. He mentioned how they often are not respected properly and don't be paid well, and since he's a male, he really feels that intensely. He notices some of the challenges you have in the classroom and the lack of time to prepare and how that's not paid.
Thank you.
Thank you.
For your time. Hello, Senator Olsen.
Thank you very much. My name is Senator Alan Olsen. I am the Senator of Senate District 8. I have been for 8 years. The question was the next budget cycle, how can we make it look different? I thought I had that answer in 2017 when I put forward a bill, Senate Bill 671. And it was extremely different. It was an ask for $9.523 billion for K through 12. It was about $200 million less than the QEM. Everybody said, how are we going to get there to that number? Because it was extraordinarily high from the 7.6 that you were at. Well, in negotiating, you never start low. You always start high. And I thought for certain that with a bill of $9.5 billion out there, I could get the school boards, I could get ESDs, I could get the school superintendents behind me to move this forward. We would negotiate in a very difficult atmosphere, but we could probably get more than the 8.2 that you did get. Unfortunately, no one stepped forward to help me move this bill forward. I'm a strong proponent of education. I've written 22 bills for education in the last 8 years. 4 of those have been passed. To me, that's not a successful record because education hasn't been funded as it should be. And I, in the next session, intend to write another bill that will provide adequate funding for education.
Thank you, Senator. And hello, Representative.
I'm Julie Parrish. I'm the state representative from House District 37. I've served in the Oregon legislature for 8 years. I'm currently serving on the Education Policy Committee and the Education Ways and Means Budget Subcommittee, which is why I was not paying attention to what people were saying. I was looking at some of the numbers that you'd thrown up there because I really want to at least correct a couple things that I heard that, right now, from 2005 to 2018, the budget for education, the overall bottom number from 5.17 billion to 8.2, it's actually a 37% increase in the education funds. And if you look at percentage of the current budget at about 18.5 billion this biennium and an $8.2 billion education budget, it's really closer to like 44%. So there's actually we've almost come back to some parity. with the 2005 data that you showed up on your screen. And I think that's important because of the increase in the budget for education since I've been in the legislature from 5.2 to 5.5 to 8.2, the elephant in the room, folks, is PERS. When I got to the legislature, it was 26 cents on the dollar of the state school fund was going to PERS. It's now 31 cents on the dollar is going to PERS of the state school fund. You can't have that kind of growth in the budget and not acknowledge the fact that over 54% of the budget, the growth in the education budget since I've been in the legislature has been swallowed by PERS. So if we're not going to talk in the next legislative session about how do we address high cost of public employee health care and PERS costs, we can keep throwing money at education and we're never going to solve the problem.
Thank you, I appreciate that. I would like some clarification because many in the comments that they said that PERS was a giant concern and they really did not want to move forward with, I take objection to the phrase tossing more money at education, but my question is, even if you're not providing those additional funds until PERS is resolved, it's still left on the backs of school districts to address PERS as it is, as well as the needs that they have. So is there if you want to include in your comments, since PERS has been brought up, what is it that you specifically see as the solution that is within the realm of what our local individuals should be handling?
What do you see as the solution for PERS?
What would you like to see? Yes.
Well, I can tell you that this afternoon there was a ballot measure filed, IP 13, which is a constitutional ballot measure that would be a pay-as-you-go pension requirement for all governments, not just states. And there was a bill drafted in the legislative session, House Bill 4070, in 2018 that would also look at addressing PERS that I believe is constitutional. I was on the PERS special session committee in 2013 when we did try to address PERS, and the Morrow case was very clear that moving forward, there are things you can do to address PERS. But ultimately, I mean, we do have to look at the fact that we cannot continue to indebt our children for pensions. And so you will probably read tomorrow about a pension ballot.
Well, I thank you for that input, and we are all very familiar with the challenge of addressing the different economic demands retirements are putting on districts as well as serving the students right now. Thank you so much. Candidate Reitz.
Hi, my name is Chrissy Reitz. I'm the candidate for Senate District 26. I am the current chair of the Hood River County School Board, and so I'm going to go back to what I do in my district when I look at a budget. Every year when we do the budget, what we look at first is what are we spending our money on in the last year, what worked and what didn't work. So I'd really like to get down to Salem and actually look at what we're spending our money on in education and what programs are actually working and what programs aren't. And that's my first step, is to make sure we're spending resources well. I do believe that we need to increase funding for schools. And the reason that I believe that is because if you don't increase and stabilize funding, you are asking districts to make decisions on programming and hiring based on numbers that they don't have. You're asking them to say, let's start this program that really can help kids, but we have no idea if we can fund it the following year. And that is, you just cannot run a district that way. You're never going to make progress on actually helping kids by doing that. So I just really would like to look at options for increasing and stabilizing. I'd like to target pre-K, make sure that our kids are ready to learn, and I'd like to make sure that we are getting our high school kids to the line, and not only that, but looking at their futures with vocational, career tech, and more training like that in our high schools. And those are the things that I'd like to look at in our budget and really concentrate on what we're doing with those things, be targeted investments that can really help kids.
Thank you. And candidate Shapiro.
Hi, my name is Barry Shapiro. I'm running for House District 18. I've been teaching art for the last 10 years. For 6 of those years, I've been teaching in the Oregon Youth Authority, incarcerated kids. One of the, there's an upside to my teaching and a downside. I've enjoyed it immensely. I've been contracted by the Salem Art Association for a lot of the public school assignments I've had. And I see this as a problem because art and music are being dropped from a lot of schools. We're asking kids to learn to take tests. We're not teaching them to imagine, to create, and to use their imaginations. You want a kid to learn math, you teach them music. I mean, there are endless studies on that. The answer to the question, which is the decline in corporate taxes and the emphasis on individual taxes, Oregon has the lowest, well, it ties Connecticut, has the lowest corporate tax rate in the country. We're extremely generous to big corporations, and we have to change our ways on that.
Thank you so much. Appreciate your time. Senator Thompson.
Thank you. Hi, my name's Chuck Thompson. I live in Hood River. I'm a pear grower up there, and luckily we got done harvest early this year so that I could attend all these forums, and nice that a pretty big turnout tonight. So I got elected almost 8 years ago. I was a county commissioner up there too for 16 years. And I spent immediately, Senator Courtney put me on the main Ways and Means Committee. I served one session on the Environment and Natural Resource Budget Committee. And then in the last 3 sessions, I've been on the Education Subcommittee with Julie. And then this year, late in the short session, he put me on the Education Policy Committee. So my focus down there, it kind of depends on what committees they put you on. So guess what my focus is? It's education. And I think I've done a great job in the last 8 years fighting for fully funding education. I'm going to continue to do that. I've always fought for, you hear the term, let's fund education first. And you go, well, what does that mean? It means that the education budget should be the first priority of any budget coming out of the legislature. And what they do is they wait till May or June when all the school districts are trying to come up with their budgets, and they're waiting and waiting for the legislature to give them a number so that you guys can all go back home and do your budgets. I'm going to continue to do that. I think I'm fully appreciative of the Measure 98, but I think that should be added dollars.
Thank you.
And I'm going to push for that too.
I appreciate your passion. Thank you. And Representative Lewis.
Thank you. My name is Rick Lewis, and I'm currently the state representative in House District 18. I started in the legislature in February of 2017. I think the first thing that we need to do is we all need to get on the same page. We need to make a conscientious decision that education is our highest priority. And before we do that, or until we do that, rather, we're going to continue to fight this battle. The last governor's recommended budget that came out at the start of the 2017 session had a figure for education that was well below what we ended up with. And so I think we spent most of our time during the session fighting to try to get that money back. I voted no on the education budget in the end because we were $200 million short of what the school officials in my district told me they needed just to maintain the current level of services. So until we make that decision and then start dealing with that, plus the PERS issue, there's some projections that I've heard that suggest that schools may go into the next biennium about $300 and some million in an increase in the PERS unfunded liability that they have to pay. We can't continue down that track. We've got to fix it, and that means everybody coming to the table and everybody working together.
Thank you. Hello, candidate Hill.
Josh Hill. For me, my greatest asset is my education. I don't have a dollar amount to say what we need to spend or what we need to do, but I do have a brother that didn't graduate high school, and we need to be more creative. We need to get creative with technical programs and help equip these teachers, these districts, these students with what they need. So like I said, I don't have a dollar amount. I don't have an answer in a minute and 30 seconds, but I can tell you it'll be my top priority.
Thank you. And hello, candidate Williams.
Hi.
I'm Anna Williams. I'm running for House District 52. I am an academic advisor for a school based in Boston. We do online education, and everyone, literally everyone in my family is a teacher. My husband teaches in a public high school up in Hood River, and my mom, for students in my district, that we listen to what they have to say, and then we work to fully fund what they're requesting. And like I think Jeff said, or Chuck said, fund education first. Make sure that that is the state's top priority because it addresses so many other issues that we're also trying to deal with. Invest in our kids, invest in our teachers, invest in our public employees, and make sure that we have a stable funding structure ready to go before we start adding on other things.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, Representative Meek.
Yes, good evening, everybody. Mark Meek, Representative House District 40, which is Oregon City, Gladstone, Jennings Lodge, Johnson City, and unincorporated Clackamas County. A lot of folks get upset if I misname them. But I've been serving for 2 years, and actually education has been one of my top priorities ever since. I owe my success to the teachers and the counselors that really, picked me out of struggling students, knowing that I had, possibilities and I had a bright future if I could focus and take care of some things. So I do know that as a broker, a real estate agent, I help folks make investments. And in my capacity as a representative now, I know that the most important investment that we can make for our future is our education. There is a conspiracy theory out there that you guys are wasting money. And it breaks my heart that Superintendent Matt Utterback has to go to the voters for an operational levy so that we can continue to support the education, the services we need. That's like, when we're going to have a bake sale for our kids, right? Now, it's irresponsible, and we need to fund our education budget first. I voted no on the budget last time. I was shooting for 8.4, so we could just at least stabilize, but that is a travesty. So I look forward to looking at new revenue resources and trying to see how we can fund our education system.
Thank you. Hello, Representative Helrich.
I just want to say thanks for everybody being here. It's great to see the forum this full and the opportunity to talk with people. For me, education is one of my legislative priorities. Before the session, a short session, I heard from the leadership from not only Clackamas County, but Multnomah County, Hood River County, and the service districts that education was first and foremost. And going through the legislative session, my priority, one of the bills, my legislative priorities that I've established to move forward is to legislative concept is Measure 1 funding. We need to fund Measure 1, which is a voter mandate that says we will fund schools appropriately, a quality education model. There's two opportunities to do that. Senator Olsen's proposal that he had, and then Representative Parrish also has some great ideas, but there's also a superintendent model, which is state representatives and the legislative body fund our education system at 33% like you're supposed to with public safety, and state legislatures figure out the rest of the budget. Fund our education system first. That's my priority. I went to public school and I understand that. I really appreciate those opportunities that were presented to me. But that's what we need to do is our education system is fund it first, and then we as legislative body figure out how we're going to fund the rest of our programs through the what's left over. Thank you.
Thank you. And hello, candidate. Is it Niran?
Niran.
Niran.
Neon with an R in the middle.
Got it. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Courtney Mirren. I am running for state representative in House District 26, which is the area between Wilsonville and South Hillsborough, including Sherwood, King City, Bull Mountain, and the farmland out in the Shoals area. What will I do to make this budget cycle look different than past cycles? As a teacher, I have experienced large class sizes and lack of resources over the last 9 years of my time in the classroom. I am very passionate about funding education, and it is the #1 reason why I'm running for this position. I do believe that we need to address that we have one of the lowest corporate tax rates in the nation, and I will be supporting increases on businesses, the largest businesses, because I do believe that they need to be paying a larger share into the pot and funding our education at a higher level. I want to be a voice for the students across the state as a representative because they do not have a vote, and I will. And I hope that I can be a voice because it is time that we stop celebrating funding the status quo and remind ourselves that this didn't used to be the way it was, that we used to have smaller class sizes and funded education, and we can celebrate when we have fully funded that quality education model that's already out there.
Thank you so much. Hello, candidate Chavez de Reamer. Thank you. My apologies.
Okay. It happens. Good evening, everybody. I'm Lorie Chavez de Reamer, and I want to talk to this issue because I have a unique perspective as Representative Lewis did previously as a mayor as well. So as a mom, a citizen, and as a mayor, I think we can hear right on the ground what's happening in our school districts, and North Clackamas being in this district of 51. And I think the mission that I heard when we listened tonight, shared responsibility, right? That should be what's sticking in our minds when we talk about this. And when I think of shared responsibility, I think of not only the private sector, which hasn't really been mentioned, but the public sector, and then of course our nonprofits. And what we've seen since I've raised my kids through this district, I've lived here for almost 18 years, is we've been underfunded at the legislature and the large class sizes. In 2008, when my kids started high school, 50 kids were going to sit in the freshman classrooms, and we had the portables, as you saw a lot around this district. And the investments of building the schools have been great, but we haven't been able to put the teachers in the schools. And so then you look to your state. And I think what's happened is not only do we want to pass the buck to the future, we're also now starting to pass the buck from the feds to the state to the individual school districts. And I find that to be shared responsibility, but a big problem. So when you ask the question, what can we do different? We all know education is number one. There isn't anybody, I don't think, sitting at this table or in this room who doesn't believe that education is the solution for the future. I was the first to go to college, and therefore I think we need to start to talk about those individual
Thank you.
Innovative ideas.
Thank you so much. And hello, Representative Isle.
Thank you. I serve on transportation policy, healthcare, a number of other committees other than education, and I can tell you everybody is after the same dollars. I served on the Education Committee in 2017, where we heard measure after measure after measure, or bill after bill after bill, that would have added an FTE or 2 or 3 to the Oregon Department of Education. I do not think that it's realistic for us to ask the taxpayers right now to trust us to use more money and expect that we're actually going to get a vote that changes our tax situation significantly. But what we can do is we can direct more of the money that we are allocating to education directly to the classroom. We do have too many kids in the classroom per teacher. We are not paying our good teachers enough. There is no question that more money needs to get to the classroom. But the only way to do that right now, realistically, is to cut down on the administrative overhead and let those local teachers and local administrators make the decision with more money going that direction than staying in Salem.
Thank you for your time. Representative Bynum.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Janelle Bynum. I proudly represent House District 51, East Portland, Damascus, Gresham, Boring, North Clackamas, and Happy Valley, 5 different school districts. I have 4 kids, and the reason that I ran for the legislature is because my kids kept coming home saying, we don't have school tomorrow. We don't have school tomorrow. We don't have school tomorrow. And the class sizes were growing, and I was very upset with that. I'll start off just by saying you can tell a person's priorities by how they spend their money. And I think funding our schools first, like many have said, is very important. Anytime the Parent Leadership Alliance came to Salem, they always came to my office and they said, Janelle, we know where you stand. We know you're on our side. And that's true. I've always stood for children and for our educators. What I would do differently is make sure that we understood the lessons from the Joint Interim Committee on Student Success, which has just finished, I think it's a tour of, I think it's 18 states. And I would also make sure that we looked into the wraparound services that the governor is funding. We're doing additional investments at the pre-K level. And I would also make sure that we removed any barriers to success that are systemic in our education system as well. So I did a high school graduation bill that removed barriers for kids who were homeless, transient, incarcerated to make sure that they got all of the credits that they had earned at the state level.
Thank you. Thank you. Representative Reardon.
Hi, thank you. Good evening. I'm Representative Jeff Reardon, District 48. I think we're in it, although Rep. Meek might argue that. We're really close to the border. Anyway, I'm finishing my third term, and in terms of my background, I am a former school board member. I've taught high school for a total of 16 years, and as recently as 6 years ago, before I entered the legislature, I also worked in industry at Tektronix for 21 years, so I have kind of a balance, I believe, of business experience and education experience, and I think it really helps when trying to grapple with some of the issues that we're facing today. I want to say first also that I was also the first of my family to graduate college, and that's been followed. I have 4 daughters who graduated from David Douglas High School. All have graduated from a university in the state of Oregon. All are employed. 2 are even in the legislature. But the difference is when those kids went to school, they did have, are you kidding? They did have robust music programs. They had summer programs for the kids. And we need to get back to where we're funding a complete education. And I'm going to wrap up on, I do look at the entire system. So love K-12. But we have to consider early childhood, the K-12. The community colleges are in a tight spot right now. And higher ed, you hear every day about tuition and the burdens that that's placing on students. So look at the system as well.
Thank you.
I have to.
Thank you. Representative Salinas.
Good evening. My name is Andrea Scalia. I'm the state representative for House District 38, which is Lake Oswego and Southwest Portland.
Could you move the mic a little closer
Sure.
to you?
Thank you. Sure. So first, I think I would want to start with, as we enter this next legislative session, I've been in my role for just a year. I came in last September. I was appointed when Ann Leininger stepped down from her position. I think first I would want to start with an intellectually honest conversation about what is needed. And I think as colleague Representative Bynum just mentioned, the Joint Committee on Student Success has been going around the state and acknowledging all of the needs of our students, including all of the wraparound services. So I wish it were as easy as just saying, I'll tinker with the budget and we can cut here and cut there. But the need is very great. Our kids are coming to school just, not prepared for education, but not prepared, perhaps by not coming from a house, but a car, perhaps by not having food, perhaps not having any health care. So I wish I could say we just need to focus on one set of the budget, but we really need to focus on revenue, and that will be my priority, is to make sure that we get more revenue for education, but for other pieces of the budget that will prepare our children to be ready for school.
Thank you. Representative Power.
Last but not least, good evening, everybody. My name is Representative Karen Power. I currently am the state representative for House District 41. I'm part of Portland and part of North Clackamas, so I have an incredibly socioeconomically and geographically diverse district. I'm the youngest woman currently serving in the legislature and also the youngest mom, so I don't yet have a kid in our public schools, but I will. I'm the daughter of a public middle school teacher, and then I married one as well. So I'm bookended by family members that have dedicated their lives to teaching kids. I ran in the opposite direction and became an in-house nonprofit environmental lawyer because I know that I'm not particularly great in speaking in front of kids. They are a terrifying bunch to me. So I want to leave you with a couple thoughts that I don't think we entirely got to. I grew up in a state without property tax caps in New Jersey. And my parents moved into an expensive school district so I could get a terrific public education and be the first in our family to go to law school. We cannot, in Oregon, have no sales tax, property tax caps that are 20 years old, and the lowest corporate tax burden in the country and expect a fully funded education. One of these things is going to have to change.
Thank you. Based on the number of people who mentioned, I have a quick follow-up question. We're not all required to answer it, but if a few of you would, I would be very interested. Just today, based on 2 thoughts, many people talking about revenue and the corporate tax and the private sector. Portland Business Journal today just electronically released an article on the top 10 schools that sent students to Harvard and Princeton and our Ivy Leagues. And it was a who's who of who had money. And it's because, with the exception of one or two schools, I'll give you that, but it's primarily a reflection of a growing chasm we see within the state of who can afford supplemental tutoring and opportunities with extracurricular activities that our public schools are not providing. I'm also a business owner. I don't know that I'd pick, despite our low tax rate, I don't know that I would pick Oregon if I didn't already live here to want to raise my kids here and have my business here. So what are your thoughts or ideas about revenue in terms of bringing business like to Oregon? How do we lure big business to generate? What are those other ideas? Because I appreciate we're already all in a love fest for education. You know, we all agree with that.
Sharon, I'm going to push back just a hair.
Okay.
I think if we begin talking about raising the corporate tax, the last thing we do is lure good business to Oregon. We're going to drive them away. So, let me just give you a quick example of why I don't agree that it's all about the money. I was the school board chairman in Groner School back in 1995. Now remember, Measure 5 happened in 1990, the property tax limitation. Happened in 1990. We were already on a cap. Groner School was educating kids at that time for about $4,800 a year per student. We had a mandatory consolidation in the state. The next year, Groner School kids, it was costing us about $6,200 a kid to educate those same kids. Groner School kids were leading that Hillsborough area in all sorts of metrics. Once we consolidated, it went right to the norm with all the other schools.
Yeah, okay, that's 1 minute. I would love, though, if you had a follow-up to the actual question related to how do we lure business to Oregon? Any thoughts on that from anybody?
Inside your question, there's actually something that it's a little troubling. There's been several studies about what will foster businesses siting in Oregon. And one of the attractions, frankly, is a stellar school system. Because business owners, as well as those that are employees, senior employees and professionals, one of the things they seek, besides our great environment, is having an outstanding education system. So I would challenge the thought on that premise.
Okay, thank you. Representative.
And I disagree with Representative Weil because I think everybody has heard the term, it takes money to make money. And if you build a skilled workforce that we can develop it here in Oregon, they would be more enticed to come and locate here and provide their wares and do their manufacturing. As it is right now, we have a lot of skilled jobs going unfilled because they cannot find qualified candidates. And what are they doing? They're searching for them outside of the state. I think we are missing the bar.
I'm going to stop there because I went off program and I'll get my knuckles wrapped as it is right now. So we're going to go on to our next presenter, and I'm very happy to introduce Linda Eastland. She's the Director of Special Education here at the Clackamas ESD, and she has two colleagues from North Clackamas and Oregon City with whom she'll be presenting. And again, slides are available in your packet.
I thank you for joining us this evening, and thank you for the opportunity to share with you some information about the intersection of mental health needs and the school system. There has been a disturbing trend that children and youth with mental health needs is worsening. It's been in the news. There are headlines from some recent Oregonian news articles that show increases in the suicide rate, not just for adults, but also for our children and youth. This isn't new news. This has been known for a while, but one of the challenges that we all face is that we can become desensitized and begin to skip over them. I challenge you to read each of these articles as they become available. As this author writes, we continue to acknowledge the problem, but we have yet to take meaningful action. Lynn Berry is a teacher at Oregon City, and she is going to share with you just what it means when our collective failure to take action impacts the classrooms.
Thank you.
Within my 20 years of teaching middle school physical education at Oregon City School District, I've noticed an increase in the mental health challenges. I currently teach over 350 students throughout the year. My goal every year is to build relationships and connect with each student through conversations and time together and through teaching. Through these conversations, students have shared with me their personal experiences and issues with anxiety, depression, and even suicidal attempts. Those conversations seem to become more of an everyday conversation. That is so upsetting to me as a teacher, to have to experience some of the crucial times in a child's life. This past week, I had a student with a behavior incident. After we talked through the situation and trust was established, he told me he was taken away from both parents and now is in DHS custody. This upset him greatly because he really wants to be living with his father. The stress affects him socially and emotionally throughout his school day and his ability to stay focused and learning. A student wants to be heard. Students want help. The trauma and stress that students come to school with is devastating to their learning environment. My biggest concern is how can we provide support to our families and our students striving to have a successful day at school. Please welcome Michael Ross, North Clackamas Director of Social Services. Thank you.
Thank you. I wanted to show you a little bit about this survey. So this was some research done 2 years ago. This came out, and Oregon ranked 51. There was a non-state that was higher than us as far as providing mental health services. These 15 different areas. They looked at adults, youth, so very comprehensive, and we ranked 51. So good news is that we now rank 44. But if we look at the youth resources, we ranked 51st. So with youth resources compared to every other state and DC, we rank at the very bottom of how we support and provide mental health resources for our students. We've heard about the adverse childhood experiences, and my point here is not necessarily what those childhood adverse experiences are. So these are the 10 for that research. But my point is that although adverse childhood experiences, I know that causes all kinds of health issues for adults if the more of these that a child has experienced before age 5. But if you look at what these are being caused by adults. And I ask, what are we doing for our adults in our community to eliminate or to help eliminate these issues for our children that have long-term impacts? In North Clackamas School District, I feel like we're doing everything we can to support students. We have supported counseling for years, and when we've had cuts, we've worked hard to not cut deep into counseling. Right now, our student ratios are 458 to 1. We have 21 therapists embedded in our schools. We have 32 different schools, and in 21 of those sites, we have a therapist that we did not pay a dime for. They bill, but there are some limitations. They can only see students on the Oregon Health Plan or if they have certain insurance. We also have two sites that have school-based health centers that have primary care, oral health, and behavioral health. And in these sites, a student can go in to see the nurse practitioner or the physician, and about 50% of the students have also an issue about mental health. And the physician or nurse practitioner is able to talk to that student and ask them, are they interested in seeing a provider? And if the student is, they're able to walk them out of the exam room down the hall in the health center still and do a warm handoff to the therapist that's right there in the health center. So even though we have all those resources, our latest Oregon School Student Wellness Survey data shows if we just look at depression alone and we look longitudinally, things aren't getting better for us. And a third of our students have felt sad almost every day for 2 weeks. And if we go look at suicide ideation, that's not getting any better for us either. And this is the percentage of students over the last, 4 surveys of students that have thought about committing or attempting suicide. So, again, I don't think a school district's doing more than we can do, and yet we are lacking resources. Thank you.
Thank you. Unlike the first question, this is not open up to everybody. You can just raise your hand. We'll have 20 minutes for this segment, and same rules apply, except it's only a minute. You'll see the yellow card at 30 seconds. and time does go by quickly. So the question at this point is, Clackamas County school districts have some incredible results with graduation rates, yet our students are carrying a tremendous weight when it comes to their social and emotional health. What's your role in ensuring an increased access to mental health resources for students and their families? Thoughts? Candidate Shapiro.
I've been campaigning on three main issues regarding education. That's there was a report out recently about the failure of our educational system. The number one issue is class size. We have to reduce our class sizes. I see there's something a little further on about teachers in the workforce, so I'll get to that. But that is an important issue. Also, I support having mental health counselors at every school. There are 22,540 and change homeless students in this state. The world has changed from when a lot of us were in school, and we have to adapt to those changes. So I'm not talking about guidance counselors, I'm talking about mental health counselors at every school.
Thank you. Candidate DeReamer? Chavez DeReamer? Got
Yeah,
it.
that's fine. Lori's good too.
Lori.
Yeah, thank you. So I just want to talk a little bit, I have a daughter who is a third-year teacher now. She taught special education right here in North Clackamas School District, behavior, grades 3 through 5. Talk about a tough day for a new teacher, but even somebody who's been doing it for 12 years, 15 years. With the things that I saw, you wouldn't know until you went into a classroom and saw a room clear, or a teacher get beat up, or another kid get beat up. I'm also helping raise my niece and nephew because their mom is a drug addict, and now she's right here in the North Clackamas School District, and I worry about that. What does it look like? Because they need counseling and they need that health care. I can see it in a 10 and a 6-year-old. We had a suicide in Happy Valley, 11-year-old who hung himself because he was gay and being bullied at school just this last year. Those kind of things that you hear right in your hometown, in your district, we know we have to do better. And if you've ever met Evan King in this North Clackamas School District, who runs a phenomenal counseling program, but what I would like to see, sometimes we throw so much money at it. Can we private partnership with and take away the barriers to let these mental health counselors who are right here in our communities go into those classrooms and do it with the private public sector together?
Thank you.
Especially tax dollars.
Thank you. Other thoughts? Representative Reardon.
Yeah, thank you. It's actually something I've been very concerned about for at least a few years. So I've been working with the counselors organization that works out of Oregon State. And what I've learned is our average in Oregon is somewhere, I think, 560, 580 students per counselor. The recommended number should be closer to 250. So obviously when we talk about our funding, we always focus on class size, but it's class size, it's also the rest of the support. On top of that, we need to work smarter. There is a new counseling framework that's being implemented where it's a system where we can get teachers, counselors, social workers, and administrators all focusing on the student in the same way. So it takes a little bit of a technical resource and professional development, but we can use the resources we have. Still need more.
Thank you. Okay, candidate Galia, and then we're going to pop back over to Representative Isle. Yes.
So this is an area that I've been working in for quite some time. When I was with the Oregon Health Authority, one of the things that we started to do was develop essentially a public health approach to identifying adverse child experiences across the state. And I think that we're at a point where we can start to incorporate some of those actions and activities into our funding decisions. There's a big fall off when kids become adolescents, and the well child visit rates in pediatric clinics falls off, where you can where you first identify issues and concerns. I think we need to develop greater collaborations between our healthcare system and education, and we have to be more seamless in our funding approach that goes along with it. I've seen the groundwork that's happened in other states that have been able to develop succinct ways of addressing the social determinants of health and incorporate that into their budget decision making. And I know that Oregon's ready to do that.
Thank you. Representative Isle, and then we'll come.
Our healthcare delivery system is in a shambles. We have lower metrics than nearly any other country and much, much higher cost. That includes our mental health issues. And this issue is not just in the schools. This starts in the homes. It starts with parents. It starts with the entire social system needing more attention around mental health. I think one of the things we've got to do with respect to this school conversation is recognize that we do, as Lorie said a minute ago, need to partner with our private sector and make sure that we get all of the resources collaborating rather than fighting over the budget numbers.
Thank you. Representative Parrish.
Thank you. First of all, if you don't have the tip line that we've enacted with the legislature, there are schools who have still not implemented that. This year so far, 1,100 tips have already come in since the start of the school year. So please get engaged with that. I was shocked to learn that not all school districts are doing that. I want to say, though, that I think school districts need to become more aggressive about Medicaid billing. We're leaving $40 million a year on the table for not billing clinical services that otherwise would be eligible for Medicaid. $40 million a year. And we're only billing for IEPs. We're not billing for clinical services for 504s, and we can legally do that. So that means you also need to be more aggressive about writing IEPs that include mental health so that you can bill for those clinical services. We've introduced legislation for the next year so that we could also bill private pay insurance, because right now the law doesn't let you do that. So if 50% of the kids are Medicaid and the other 50% are not, and we're leaving a lot of money for healthcare delivery in the classroom that you all are using education dollars for that really should come from healthcare dollars.
Thank you. And first candidate Williams, and then to Representative Helfrich.
So one of the issues in my campaign is that Oregon ranks dead last with regard to access to mental health services across the board. And that's something that our adults and our children are all struggling with, right? So as a social work educator, improving access to mental health education, making sure that we have enough social workers, that they live in our rural communities, that they understand how people's lives look, is something that we need to invest in as well, and getting school social workers into the schools. My husband is a math teacher, and he has students that sleep in his classroom because that's the safest place for them to sleep. And so we do really need to address stability in those families outside of the school district so that the teachers can focus on teaching and mental health care providers can provide that service either within the school or from outside.
Thank you. Representative Helfrich.
Thank you. For me, as a former law enforcement officer for 25 years, I understand early and often intervention and prevention makes a difference. For Clackamas County district here, you guys have a great program for suicide prevention. Suicide is a permanent solution to a temporary problem with somebody in crisis. They're in crisis. It could be a mental health component, but they're in crisis. We have to have our teachers and be able to recognize that, as they've talked about here, that hot handoff to the mental health professionals. So some pre-session or pre-filing legislative concept that I have in place is partnering with CCOs in the private sector, looking at the funding sources to be able to put mental health workers in our schools. But I want our mental health workers and that partnership to be in our middle schools, because our middle schools are the ground zero to our elementary schools and the closest to our high schools. And so that's one of the things I'd like to see there, because like Anna has said, that our rural communities suffer from that too, so we have to have the access. And it can't just be in a high school somewhere where we have barriers created by transportation.
Thank you. Thank you. Representative Power.
Thank you. So one of the most poignant and difficult stories and testimony that I've ever had to sit through was back when I was on Milwaukee City Council. A father came to testify during our public hearing. He had received a no-cause eviction. He had been up to date on his rent. As far as he knew, he hadn't caused any problems. And his son was in Rao Middle School and was high special needs. He couldn't find any other housing in our city. And so his backup plan was to sleep in the car with his son for as long as it takes to make sure that his son didn't disrupt his education and his progress. We also need to think at the same time that we're funding mental health services in schools, on the back end, what is the experience like for parents? Because that trauma that they're experiencing, the financial difficulties that they're experiencing are manifesting earlier and earlier with kids. So it's incumbent upon us to also make sure that we are getting more housing, stable housing for our families.
Thank you. Candidate Polson.
Yes, thank you. I think I agree with a lot of the things that have been said here. I'm just going to add to it. The I think we're not making enough assumptions about what a person, our children's social cognitive age actually is. I know that from my son and others that if you have a 17-year-old, he looks like 17, but he may actually only have achieved a social cognitive level about age 5. And we have these today, and all of these have the net result of not enough social engagement. So a lot of our kids today could actually have that lower social cognitive age. And if we make assumptions that they are at a higher age, then we're missing these issues that are coming up that we should address more at a basic level.
Thank you. And Representative Salinas?
Thank you. So a couple of people have mentioned prevention, and I do think prevention is probably the most economically efficient way to address a lot of these problems. We passed in HB 4145, which was the boyfriend loophole bill last session, we included $250,000 to start as in a serious way and really adding dollars, but again, it comes back to adding dollars.
Thank you. Others?
Yes. So this has been a really interesting discussion to listen to. And what I find the most interesting about it, just really briefly, is way back when they were required to do a school funding formula that provided equal funding across all schools, they said the easiest way to do this would be to look at students that attend ADM, right? ADM, W weighted, whatever. And so now when we look at how we fund schools, we take a look at the students who are pregnant or are learning English or any of these other categories, and we give a little bit more money towards that. What's not in there anywhere is the stuff that I talk to my superintendents about in my district, where they say what they really care about, what they're really affected by right now, in addition to those issues, are these other issues around mental health. And there's really nothing in the funding formula or in the stuff that we talk about when we talk about these big numbers for schools that cover PERS and healthcare and negotiations and providing additional extracurricular activities that addresses these questions of mental health. And when I had these conversations with my superintendent, I said, why aren't we doing this through Human Services? Why is this happening through the schools? And so that, I think, continues to be an issue for me, to Representative Parrish's point, that maybe this is the wrong funding bucket.
Thank you. Thank you. And Senator Thompson?
Thank you. I think it's very important that K through 12 gets back to full school days again. I think I read somewhere where the state of Washington, if our equivalent kid starts kindergarten and graduates, our kids are going to school a year less. Well, I think what's happening, especially in the mental health issues and the other issues that come up amongst kids besides just teaching them with all the other problems we're seeing with homelessness and, like you said, sleeping in cars, having to feed everybody. I think that should be looked at like another one of those unfunded mandates, because everybody expects, all the parents and all the folks around the state expects our school, they're expecting our schools to take care of all these issues. So I think the school district should come up with some formula, and then those dollars should cover that part of this growing concern, and that should be dollars on top of what the current school dollars are.
Thank you. Thank you. And Candidate Reitz?
We, in the Hood River County School District, we do have a student-based health center as well, and we do have mental health providers right outside of our high school, and so I'm very proud of what we do, but I do agree with some of the things that have been said over here is we absolutely need to touch our kids at school. We need to make sure their mental health is addressed at school, but to not think about healthcare as a whole is losing part of that equation. So we need to make sure that we are also addressing mental health for our entire population if we really want to have an effect on our kids' mental health.
Thank you. We have time for 2 more responses. Anyone? Oh, Senator Olsen.
Thank you very much. Very important discussion.
You want to pull that closer to you.
I'm sorry.
No, that's all right. I just want to hear you.
Very important discussion, very interesting discussion. Unfortunately, in my school district, we had 2 suicides. And it's terrible to hear that a child is so despondent that they can't get through to the next day. But I look at it from a more pragmatic standpoint. Not being a parent myself, I look at the fact that leadership at the state level, from the governor's office, is inadequate. We as legislatures try to move programs forward, try to move bills forward that will help our mental health system and help our children. but we don't get the support that we should be getting from the governor's office. And I think that was where the start should come from, because she is our superintendent of public schools also. And I think with more support from that level downward, I think we can see a remarkable move forward in this programs.
Thank you, Senator. Okay, thank you for your participation. That was beautiful. And we're going to move on to our next section. We're going to shave off just a couple of minutes of for each section to come, so we'll be making those announcements. Right now, we're fortunate to have Ryan Carpenter speaking to us, a superintendent from Estacada School District, on our third topic.
Thank you. On behalf of the superintendents of Clackamas County, I'd like to thank you for attending tonight and listening to high priority education issues. Tonight, you've been hearing from practitioners, school leaders, students, and community members affiliated with Clackamas County Schools. This is the ground level speaking to you tonight. And aside from school funding, unsolved PERS problems, and social emotional well-being of our students and families, another grave issue that's brewing, which requires cooperation and collaboration among us all, is developing a quality educator workforce. This problem is actually threefold. One, a big teacher shortage. Two, competition with Southwest Washington schools. And three, teacher burnout. And so I want to talk a little bit about some national, some state, as well as some local statistics to promote this as evidence of some of the grave concerns occurring in our schools today. So in 2018, currently this year, the nation is experiencing a shortage gap that's estimated around 100,000 teachers. That's part of the reason why you're seeing higher class sizes, as well as finding qualified educators, both in student services, special education, and just as a general education teacher at the classroom level. In 2015-16, Oregon's initial teacher licensing program, as well as, if you kind of take a look at the graphic that I have behind, and you might be able to see it there are 35% fewer new teachers that are being certified today than a decade ago. You can see in 2008-2009, 42,000 teacher licensures, and in 2012-13, the most recent that's out there, 19,000. Why are people not wanting to become teachers today? Great questions. It's expensive to go to school. The payout is not great. Now we train our teachers how to disarm shooters. Interesting. You also see that there's a higher demand. You may have noticed as legislators and senators, the population of Oregon is growing, meaning there are more families moving to Oregon, meaning we need to support our students, the growing populations of our schools, with more teachers. It goes hand in hand. I also want to point out that the Oregon public schools who are doing the teacher programs, I'm talking higher education, 1,000, Portland State, Concordia, you follow me, 1,793 students are graduating from these programs ready to take on a teaching position. In 2015-16, we being K-12 schools, needed 2,937 teachers. The big 5 school districts, Portland Public Schools, Beaverton, Hillsborough, Salem, and Eugene, their needs alone of occupancy or vacancies are greater than what higher institutions are pumping into the system. Another interesting statistic I want to share with you, as Superintendent Utterback of North Clackamas took us through looking at some data, the average teacher hired in the North Clackamas School District has 6 years of experience. So what this tells us in Clackamas County, a very close-knit group, a very close-knit community, is that people from the Estacada School District or rural schools could potentially be leaving their current spot to join into a different district, leaving rural communities and some of the other areas strapped with first-year teachers, if that makes sense to you. And so one of the things that's a challenge for us is we're beginning to cannibalize each other because our needs are so great. So school districts are creating recruiting flyers, brochures. Why should I come to the Estacada School District and not to the Canby School District, so on and so forth? It's an epidemic that we need to take a better look at. The second problem is, obviously, we saw in the news quite a bit of strike issues going on in Southwest Washington. One of the results of that, which is detrimental to us here in Clackamas County, is the pay scale that was developed through this. And you'll notice in Washougal, Vancouver, Camas, Hawkinson, and Battlegrounds, this is the area that's only 15 miles away from where I stand right now. We're not talking about at a different country or a completely different state. And so you'll notice that the starting salary now in Southwest Washington is $51,000, or basically lower 50,000s. Clackamas County's average teacher salary to start is in the upper 30,000s, and it ranges all the way to the high 70,000s. You'll notice those in the high salary schedule in Southwest Washington are in the 90,000s. So let me pose to you this rhetorical question. If I graduate from college ready to teach in an average of $27,000 of student loan debt, where am I going? To somewhere that pays more. And so it's going to be continuing to be a challenge for us in Clackamas County as to how can we recruit even our own schools, institutions, teachers coming in if we have to compete with higher salaries. The last piece I want to talk to you about a little bit is obviously the teacher burnout, and that continues to be a problem for us as well. 40 to 50% of new teachers leave the profession in the first 5 years. Here's another staggering statistic. 1/3 of Oregon's teachers today are eligible for retirement tomorrow if they wanted to. This means that they're over 55 years old, as well as they've been working in public education for 5 years or more. Hopefully they won't do that tomorrow. Teacher vacancies will accelerate in the next 5 years, as we talked about. And so what's driving teacher turnover? Well, a lack of classroom autonomy and testing-based accountability, the environment. We talked about fighting, getting hit, getting bit. All of those things lead to that as well. Student management and discipline is what I'm referring to. And dissatisfaction with administration and the lack of resources and support. But here's another thing I also want to point out that is the fourth driver. That's something that we all need to pay better attention to. Did you know that in Clackamas County, 26% of its students identify as a student of color? Did you know that in Clackamas County, only 7% of its staff considers to be a staff of color? And so as we work together to work on how can we make our teachers better, more prepared, and more of them, period, we also need to think about how we can attract and retain people of color. And so I want to thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Ryan. So your question now, we're going to have about 17, 18 minutes in this round, volunteer basis only again. And just so you know, if you've spoken, I'm tracking it. And we love data here. So I just want to ensure we're not favoring any one candidate over another. So I'm just keeping track, and if it seems like I haven't gotten to you this round, it's because perhaps you spoke last round. Okay, so the question we would like you to answer now. 1/3 of our educator workforce is eligible to retire, and we're not seeing an infusion of new teachers. Teachers 15 miles away are making significantly higher wages. What can you do as a statewide leader, because public education is a public service, to ensure Oregon educators aren't fleeing the state or the profession? So thoughts on that? Representative Hellrich, that was a fast hand. You did speak before, but go ahead.
Thank you. We talked about it earlier, fully funding education. We know the model, we know how to do it, we know the costs. But one of the things that before this session started was meetings I had with Superintendent Ripley and others, and others. It was about this very topic. Representative Bynum and others, I reached across the aisle and we passed a piece of legislation that I introduced, was House Bill 4044, which directly relates to education in the retention, recruiting, and ongoing professional development of our teachers. That's important. That study is going to be done statewide by the Chief Ed Office. They're going to report back to us in 2019, and we will implement those strategies. The reason why it was worked bipartisanly, bicamerally, was because we as a legislative body worked together because we understood this very important. That said, I'll be the first one, and I'll have to ask everybody in this audience, when we get that model back and we get what the best practices are, why the teachers are staying in certain districts and they're not, we need you to testify in front of our committees.
Thank you. That's very helpful. Other thoughts? Senator Thompson.
I'm just going to talk to the part about it because Representative Helfrich graciously allowed me to co-sponsor his bill last session, so he already talked about that one. I'll just put it in this perspective. If I grow pears for a living, that's what I do, and it comes harvest time, and if I'm paying $14 a man, and my neighbor's paying $20, who's going to have people to pick their fruit? Not me. They're not going to come to my place. So we have to keep up in these booming times. It's tough to find anybody to build your house, do your plumbing, because everybody's so busy. We have to keep up with the neighbors if we're going to attract good teachers.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Representative Meek.
Oh, well, thank you. I thought you were going to go across the room there. Part of attracting a good workforce is stability. And the way that Oregon funds education is through the general fund. And we need to seriously look at that because a lot of the teachers left the industry back in 2010 when they were cut. And why would you want to go back and spend money on an education to go into an industry that you're volatile and may not have a job in a couple years when the economy changes? So we have to look at a way to change our general fund and how we're funding education, make sure it's dedicated, stable, and consistent. Then we can fund and give our teachers the salaries they need and make sure they come back to the well so that we can give them a job. So.
Thank you for your time. Representative Bynum.
All right, thank you. A couple of points. 20 years ago when I came out of school as an electrical engineer, I made $43,000. That was 20 years ago, and that's what we're paying teachers now. This $50,000, they should be making that. We shouldn't be paying them $30-some thousand. First point. Second point is I've noticed that teacher licensure to transfer here into Oregon is too difficult. It was difficult for one of my superintendents, and I think that needs to be addressed. If you want people to get the value for their money that they're putting into their education, you need to not make it so difficult for them to transfer across lines.
Thank you. We're going to go candidate Williams, and then we'll pop over to Representative Power, and then I'll check back over on this side.
I can't scoot to the mic, so I'll pull it to me, sorry. So I know that we chose to move to Oregon because of the way that its teachers are compensated. We had a few options on the table, including Montana and Oklahoma. So if you look at what's happened in those states recently, you can see we're comparing ourselves against some states that are doing much, much worse. But one of the reasons why we chose Oregon is actually the benefits package that is offered to teachers. And so making sure that as we're having these funding conversations, we're not using PERS and we're not using the Oregon Educator Benefits Program as a weapon against teachers and sort of blaming them for the funding problems that our education system is suffering right now is really, really important because they're investing their lives, they're putting in their full time, they're really committed to doing what's best for students, and so threatening their benefits as a weapon to manage our funding stream is I think, hurtful and harmful and does push teachers out of the system.
Thank you. Representative, what did I say was next? Power? Yes, I think I did. Thank you.
I'll echo candidate Williams. When my wife has a bad day at middle school and she comes home, and whether it's an issue with a parent or a kid, I remind her that of something former President Obama said during one of his State of the Union speeches, which was calling teachers our nation builders, which is what they are. And we should be treating them that way and having a respectful conversation around retirement benefits that reflects both the time and years put in of our retiring teachers, our retired teachers, and our current teachers. The second I want to add is the promises of public student loan forgiveness under the Trump administration have eroded at best and are laughable. In all our reality, we've seen more than 95% of applications denied this year. And those of us who are still working towards these programs know that. There's going to be very little incentive for teachers to go into low-paying, high-debt jobs if we don't, as a state, figure out some way to find a way to backfill that somehow.
Thank you. And candidate Reitz.
I've really enjoyed a lot of the things that have been said here, and I think they ring true. I guess I'd really like to address what was talked about we have, in Hood River County School District, we have about 50% English as a second language, and we really have struggled with having our teaching staff workforce sort of match that. But there are some really great programs in Oregon that are built to help that. And so as a state senator, I'd really like to look at that, where we are taking people that are already in our districts, instructional assistants and staff, and using some of those programs, such as the program in Portland State, that actually is a bilingual teaching pathway. And so as a solution for one of those, I'd really like to look at exploring how the state can support districts in actually taking people that are already living in our communities, already working with our students, already in our districts, and really supporting them to become teachers, licensed teachers.
Thank you. And candidate
Olsen. Thank you. I don't think the word profession has been celebrated enough. Teaching is truly a profession. That means that it's not predefined. That means that, it's something that you practice, and you have to choose it as a lifestyle. I'm a professional engineer, and I chose that profession to practice it, and that's my life's goal. And we don't celebrate that enough, not even close. And so the idea of having less autonomy in a classroom and having testing-based accountability that teachers are measured against that's the wrong way to go as far as I'm concerned. They celebrate the profession, and they have the administrators and others measure that based upon merit.
Thank you. Other questions? Representative Parrish.
Thank you. I think we need to think about who can be in our classrooms. So my husband works in our school district, middle school science fair coordinator. It's a part-time job. He has an engineering degree from West Point. He's taught at Southern Oregon and OIT, but he can't actually be a teacher in our classroom without going and getting that additional step. I have 3 kids to put through college. I'm not sending my husband back to go take on debt to go get a teaching degree. That's not going to happen. But he also doesn't need the health care, so he doesn't burden our school district with taking the health care because he has health care through his military service in the VA. We have a lot of people out there who would like to come back into our classrooms and teach. And I think if we can free up school districts to hire who they need to hire based on the needs of the district, which might not mean that they have that 5th year degree. My sister-in-law is a teacher in Texas. She's a teacher educator in Texas in her district. She doesn't have the 5th year certificate here in Oregon, and we're native Oregonians. She'd love to move to Oregon, and my brother would love to come home. But she's not going to go back when they're putting 2 kids through college, and she's not coming to Oregon because of the limitations that we put on teachers who want to come here or people with real world experience who can go in and help in our classrooms.
Thank you. Thank you. Others on this side? Yes, Representative Lewis.
Thank you. It was interesting to listen to that conversation because I spent almost 40 years in law enforcement, and the last 28 as police chief. And there's so many similarities. Law enforcement's been dealing with that same issue of retention for years and years, where you've got officers that come to the agency and it's a training ground, and they learn what they can until a better job comes along at higher pay, and then they're out the door. One of the things that we tried was, and it's actually been fairly successful, and I don't know whether it can be done with school districts, but retention contracts, where if a new teacher comes in for a period of time, they sign a contract and an agreement that in exchange for gaining that experience, they agree to stay with that district for a period of time. And the last thing I want to mention is I know that there's an interim task force that's made the rounds of the state, talking to educators and learning more about the issues that they're dealing with. I'm looking forward to seeing what they come back with in the way of recommendations.
Thank you. Other thoughts? Yes, Representative Reardon.
Thank you. First of all, I am chair of the Higher Ed Workforce Committee, and so I pay a lot of attention to workforce issues. And it's clear to me that finding good employees is a challenge across all industries, so it's not just education. So just to put it in perspective, in terms of retaining our teachers, I think there's 2 things. One is we need strong mentoring programs. Becoming a teacher, I mentioned a number of careers I've had. Teaching is the hardest thing I ever did in my entire life. I did it for 16 years. 16 years. A couple of them I might have even done a good job. but really, really hard. I mean, just at the end of the day, hard. But on top of that, so mentoring is a big help. You talked about how many teachers we lose, 50% in 5 years. They need help to get off the ground. And then obviously, we need to have a compensation package, both benefits and pay that's competitive.
Thank you. Thank you. And Senator Olsen.
Thank you very much. Although it is unfortunate that we lose 40 to 50% of the teachers in the first 5 years, in the private sector, most new businesses that start up are closed in year 3 or by year 3. So actually teachers are going a little bit farther, and I really applaud them for doing it. But my question would ask the 4 areas that were covered: student management and discipline and dissatisfaction with administration. I'd like to know what percentage of those teachers that were leaving said that that was the problem and not the fact that the resources were not adequate.
Thank you. Other thoughts? Any other comments? Oh, yes, sorry, Representative Vile.
We talked about teacher burnout, and I was listening carefully to that. My sense is that, and this is kind of a theme with me, you'll notice tonight, that has more to do with a lack of autonomy in the classroom than it does with anything else. Teachers need to be recognized as the person that knows best what should happen in their classroom. Finland, in the recent McKinsey report, is emerging as the #1 educational system in the world. They have been working on this since the 70s. They are betting on good teachers as the solution to the education problem and classroom autonomy. And I think it's working, and the statistics show that it is.
Great. Thank you so much. We're actually going to pause right there. Thank you. And our next speaker, it's perhaps I'm most excited about because we love it when students are involved. So I would like to welcome Jessica Yu, who's a student from Westland Wilsonville School District. Yeah, that one we get to applaud. She probably has homework, so thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you so much. So again, my name is Jessica Yu. I'm a senior at Westland High School and a member of Oregon Student Voice, a student-led organization that empowers students to be authentic partners with our education decision makers. Today,
as close as you can to the mic.
Thank you. Today, I'd like to address the issue of school safety, and in particular, how it relates to bullying and mental health among our students. So last year, Oregon Student Voice conducted a statewide survey on students' experiences at school. What we found most striking about the results was that they were really similar throughout the states. Students all over Oregon exhibited highly similar stances and experiences on the issues that we asked them about. So what that means is that the conclusions we drew from the results could be equally applied anywhere, including here in Clackamas County. Unfortunately, the survey showed us that bullying still remains a major issue in our schools, because 1 in every 5 students reported having been bullied in the past 30 days. And this included incidents of racism, sexism, queerphobia, social bullying through the spread of rumors, and cyberbullying online. So we dug deeper into the issue, looking into schools' cultures to find what may be the cause of this phenomenon. And what we found was that 1/3 of all students felt that there was a lack of mutual respect throughout their schools, a percentage that was even higher among women and students without college plans. So it seems that bullying may be a symptom of this general disrespect towards students who deviate from what we might call a classic mold. After all, students tend to alienate those who are unlike them, and even teachers may cater to this mold in their teaching. When asked to comment on the flaws of our current education system, a student from Clackamas County stated, "Students should be allowed to have a different view and not looked down upon for it or graded differently if their view is different than that of their teacher." Clearly, we're not seeing this right now. We're not affording students the respect and attention they deserve as individuals. It is allowing this cycle of alienation and bullying to persist in our schools. Studies have shown that nearly 80% of all cases of bullying go unaddressed. Sometimes this is because students don't report it, but other times students do reach out to teachers and administrators, but those reports go ignored because there's no one in the school system held accountable to address it. Our broken response system makes it even more important for students to have access to adequate mental health resources. But over 40% of the students we surveyed indicated that they don't have adequate mental health resources in their schools, which means that bullied students are going with their issues completely unaddressed. So how can we improve? We have to start by improving avenues of communication between students, teachers, and administrators. It must be clearly stated where students should go to report incidents of bullying. But more importantly, we must hold schools accountable to investigate these reports in a timely manner. And we'd like to thank Representative Salinas for sponsoring a bill in this upcoming session that would create a clear pathway for this reporting. It's also important to make sure that schools make students aware of existing mental health resources, like school counselors or youth lines that they can text for help. But clearly, what we have isn't enough because, for example, school counselors on average handle over 500 students in Oregon. So students might have to wait weeks in order to secure an appointment. A solution for this is the creation of school-based health clinics in which students can receive help immediately from a licensed professional. And lastly, we have to educate students to accept and cherish people's differences, to stop this endless cycle perpetuating the existence of a perfect mold in society. Ultimately, if we're able to build a strong enough student community, maybe we can alienate the concept of bullying itself. Thank you.
Thank you, Jessica. Very nice job, Jessica. I'm going to add one thought before we jump into what the question is. Just as a frame of reference, and because this was a student-led area, last night at the gubernatorial debate for Children First, I happened to know some of the behind-the-scenes information because of being on that board. And we had triple digits in terms of students submitting questions wanting to ask the governor, and overwhelmingly from around the state, small communities to large communities, very diverse communities to not so much. The primary concern things kids were asking about was feeling safe in mental health. It was shocking just to hear that when you listen to the voice of kids, it's the number one thing on their mind when it comes to schools. So with that in mind, and thank you to Jessica's comments and information, our question is, bullying in school hallways and classrooms isn't a new issue. And thanks to technology, our students are now barraged 24/7. How can schools continue to work with our state legislators to more urgently address the safety concerns of our students and others? And again, we're going to have about 15 minutes and 30 seconds, 1 minute response. So, yes, Representative Salinas.
Thank you, and thank you, Jessica. As Jessica mentioned, I will be bringing a bill forward that is really dovetailing off a bill we did last session that asks school districts to set some protocols in place when an issue of sexual harassment comes up. This will extend beyond sexual harassment, and it'll do it at the beginning of a complaint process, but to make very clear of what that complaint process is. I know that I have a daughter who is 13 years old in junior high, and I just occasionally ask her when I see something that pops up on Facebook about the mean girl issue. I'll just ask her, have you recently been harassed, or have you witnessed any of this? And she says no, but I know I'm her mom. I'm not the person she's going to talk to either. So I would love additional resources for all of our kids in the schools, and I think that that's the next step. We also will put a bill forward that will provide 2 FTEs. Right now, the Department of Education only has a quarter-time FTE to comply with Title IX, and that is woefully inadequate. So we will be asking for 2 full-time employees.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to come back first to candidate Williams and then to Representative Lewis.
At one point in my career, I was a prevention program manager for an organization called Haven, which is a sexual and domestic violence response organization. And in that job, we worked with the Sexual Assault Task Force and the CDC's Future Without Violence to create a curriculum that's a sexual violence and bullying prevention program, which is provided by nonprofit workers in the public schools. scaled from K through 12 and aligned with the Oregon health standards. It was very, very effective in terms of students reporting increased safety. There are activities that can identify where in schools kids feel unsafe and then actually target resources to those locations within the school. But one of the things that I think is important is that it was provided by outside people so that if students felt nervous to talk to a teacher about something, there was another person there in the classroom. And so thinking about ways that we can incorporate more of those types of programs, Andrea, I would love to talk to you more about that. And it also included a component with regard to safe technology and being aware and thoughtful about the use and how it plays out. And so I would love to work more on that.
Thank you. Representative Lewis?
Thank you. I could talk for quite a while on this issue. I spent some time during the interim visiting with some people I would consider experts in this area. There's a couple of things. I've got a bill that's pre-session filed that tightens up the definition of imminent threat and requires that mental health counselors, psychologists, doctors, anybody that receives information within that definition immediately reports that threat to law enforcement so that it can be dealt with. The other thing is the multidisciplinary threat assessment team concept. I support expanding that statewide, making sure the funding is available if it's needed. Also, situational awareness training for teachers, if they don't already have it. Armed security in the schools, which could be done using former police officers or people that can go through the law enforcement training center in Oregon and be trained on the use of a firearm and work with law enforcement so they understand the procedures that would happen in the event of an intrusion and hardening security.
Thank you. Yes, candidate Shapiro.
I'm not sure what hardening schools means. The lieutenant governor in Texas thought there were too many doors in the school at Santa Fe High School. But I will agree with Representative Lewis that threat assessment is a very important technological program that we have to our availability to our we have to look at other school systems and see what they're doing. The Salem-Keizer school system has a groundbreaking program. I've met with John Van Driel, who heads up that program. He literally wrote the book on threat assessment. And I know it's been used in other districts, and we really should be taking advantage of other people doing the research that all schools need.
Thank you. On this side, yes, candidate Reitz.
So I'd like to take it back a step and bring it back to the students. I'd really like to see us learning about and investing in programs that are actually student-based. We use a system at our high school right now. It's called Positive Behavior Interventions and Supports. It's fantastic. We have had very good results with kids and students actually taking responsibility for sort of watching each other and making sure that we're being kind to one another. So I'd really like to look at it as a state senator, really looking and exploring these programs that are really school-based and student-based to see that we can actually engage the kids and really make them feel like it's them that are going to really create the change in our schools that we need to see, and we can support that.
Thank you, Representative Meek, and then candidate Galia.
Yellow.
Am I right?
You found the stars.
Galia. Okay, it's only been 2 hours. I apologize. Okay.
I agree with the candidate Reitz, but also the issue is it's the human element. Time. Do the teachers have the time to really connect and understand and having these conversations? Somebody has trouble. One of the kids is having a problem. You have 20 seconds before the next class comes in, or 2 minutes. You don't have time to do that. And so we need to come up with and figure out how we can provide the resources towards schools and districts to include counselors so that we have curriculum like that will support the learning process for our students, but also somebody that can sit there and listen. We had students visit us at the Capitol last week during Ledge Days, and their biggest question was, our counselors all about our career track and what we're going to take next, but not about, I'm having anxiety about taking my test and getting prepared, and we're getting bullied, and I feel threatened. And they don't have time to address these in a proper way.
Thank you. And candidate, my apologies.
It's all right. And there'll be a quiz at the end of this.
Clearly.
So there's a couple things that have been said that I think that deserve reiteration, but there's a confluence of factors that are contributing to the bullying and not being able to identify them. There's the stigma that would go associated if you go down a kind of enforcement avenue, but yet we're still unable to have adequate school-based health centers funding and mental health services that would go along with it. So it's like we have to do a big leap. So a shortfall would be the peer counseling, that kind of activity that would be done with it. But underneath it, I think we didn't address one of the earlier concerns. It was about race and ethnicity and gender that are explicitly drawn. I'm hopeful that your bill could be expanded and to cover those subjects as well.
It will cover everything.
Thank you. Candidate Niram?
Hey, as a teacher, when I came back into the classroom after being a full-time mom, I was very aware of a culture change that had happened while I had stepped out of the classroom. I was very aware that my students had a higher tendency to do kind of micro bullying, like jabbing their friends and calling them names, even if they were friends. And so I feel like there's a culture shift that's happening. Part of what I think is contributing to anxiety is the connection to social media, and students are growing up like movie star children. There's no off button. They know immediately when they're not invited somewhere. They know immediately when somebody's being mean. I do think that student-centered, intentional empathy training is important. And one of the things I remember from one of my first years teaching, they brought in some trainers who were talking to the students, and one of the most poignant things I remember hearing from that particular training was the statement, "You can't hate someone whose story you know."
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, Senator Olsen.
Thank you very much. I'd like to just kind of break this down for me in my simple mind to the basics. I think it goes to the class size. A smaller class size encourages interaction amongst students. They can sit there and they can talk with each other. They can learn who each other are. They can find out, who would be a good friend and who might not be a good friend. But the smaller class size really instills that connection between people. When you have 35 people in a class, you just can't get to that position where you understand and know everybody. But if you had 15 people, you could learn what everyone is about and how they think. And I think that would probably go a long way to eliminating a lot of the problems.
Thank you. Candidate Drazen.
First, I would like to again thank Jessica for your presentation today. That was very brave, and I appreciate everything that you put into this. And I'd also like to say that I have teenage boys and an 11-year-old daughter, and I can tell you microbullying is such an apt term for this. It makes students feel socially fragile all the time as far as where they're at in the social hierarchy, and that's very corrosive. It can lead to actual physical danger for those students, or it can just lead to social problems within the classroom that adversely impact their learning experience. So I would like to say around this issue, I think that student-focused solutions are the best solutions and really are the only ones long-term that will work. But leadership at a school level, I think, is critical, and I think the question of who's responsible if cyberbullying occurs, I think that there needs to be some clear protocols and pathways so that not only law enforcement is involved, but something short of that, I think schools need to get engaged as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Halbert. And then we're going to move to candidate. Don't stop. No, I got it. This way, everybody gets to hear your name a lot of times because I'm making multiple efforts. Candidate Chavez DeReamer.
It's a great presentation. I appreciate that. You had to sit up in front of a bunch of adults and tell us your thoughts, and that's courageous. It's important to hear from students. Representative Lewis talked about legislation that he's introduced, and I'm also introducing the legislation from the same Kaiser model. They talk about the threat assessment. Threat assessment just isn't what it sounds like. Threat assessment. It's about a group of people sitting at a table sharing information. Bullying at the simplest levels can turn into a larger threat, a larger problem in schools, whether it's sexual assault, domestic violence and could result in school shootings or harming our students. We have to deal with those problems early and often. Representative Salinas talked about joint student success when we're in Clackamas and Title IX. I'm glad to hear that we have representatives that are listening and putting legislation forward. That's what it's about, is listening and getting these ideas and pushing that nose of the football over the finish line and getting this stuff passed. So that can help, we can't do it.
Thank you. Go, Lorie.
So I just kind of wanted to talk about the fluidity, because what teachers often say sometimes is that I do all this work during the day and then they go home and it gets ruined, right? That we don't know what's happening. They come back, we start over. So we also have to do that in our communities as well. And for instance, this young woman is a peer-to-peer Happy Valley Youth Council that we started, and it's because, you know, the Happy Valley Youth Council is made up of students in Happy Valley, but they go to Clackamas, LaSalle, and they did a bully block day 8 years ago when we started. They worked with Facebook. There was, I don't know, 35 kids who sat in a room, and they went onto the social media and said, you're not going to bully our peers. You're not going to, and we have to listen to, they're so empowered if we just listen to what they have to say. They're good at making legislation. There would be nothing more rewarding to, I bet you, all of us, if we can move out of these seats in no time and let these kids start to make the legislation that means something to them. We think we know what they want, but we don't listen enough, right? These kids are the smartest. The millennials, we talk about, they make, you guys have the best ideas. And I look forward to you leaving, going off to college.
Thank you.
Coming back and taking our seats.
Thank you. Representative Bynum.
I'll speak up for the kids of color, and I'll start by saying you can't legislate humanity. I strongly believe that. So there's no law that the state can make that will force kids to treat each other as human beings, no matter their race or color. What can happen is that school districts can develop policies and procedures to address when kids have transgressions and treat the kids as all kids. They're experimenting with community building, and they take those lessons from us. So when my kids have, you know, like in the toddler room, been the biter and the bitey, we tried to solve it as families. And I hope that going forward, especially within the sports arena, that we come up with solutions for when children have been called the N-word, when they've been ostracized, and when they've been the person doing the transgressions as well. So you can't legislate humanity.
Thank you. And Representative Parrish.
Well, I'm about to get to claim you as a Westland High student. I've got 2 teenagers at Westland High. And you know, my frustration as a parent for our kids is that I feel like we're not connecting them to being resilient. And to do that, it requires parents. And tonight I heard educators, and we need counselors, and we need, you know, our kids involved, and we didn't talk about the parents. And I know that, you know, we've tried to tackle like drug alcohol issues in our community. And when my son comes home to me and says, well, mom, snitches get stitches, you know, that's probably not what we want, right? We want kids to feel safe that they can go and report issues that are happening in their community, whether it's drug and alcohol use, which certainly, you know, leads to all kinds of other issues around bullying. We know that from that tip line I mentioned earlier, bullying is one of the #1 calls that they're getting. So there's a lot of frustration for children right now who are just going, I don't even know where to turn. I don't know how to get help. So I think school districts really need to rethink their bullying policies, bring kids into the equation as those policies are being created, and teach our children some resiliency about how to move forward when those issues come up.
Thank you. We have time for one more, and we're going to finish with candidate Fraser Lindsay.
Thank you. They were having trouble with high school graduation rates at my local high school, and the new principal came in and assigned the students to a staff member. So every student had some staff member who would be talking to them frequently and checking in with them. And they noticed that that program helped the high school graduation rates, and I assume that it also would help with the bullying problem. That student has someone that they can quickly talk to when things aren't going well. I know my niece's daughter, she comes to our family get-togethers, and she commented there where she feels comfortable talking to us about how she is being called names at school. And I know my sister, her grandma, helped her with that, but it would be nice if the parents and grandparents, they knew who that child was assigned to so that they could talk to that person when they hear that there's a problem going on.
Thank you. Excellent comment. This was a phenomenal experience. Thank you so much. I think we all want to give all of you a big round of applause. And we appreciate you being out here. Your audience is not just any audience. You talked about a large turnout, but these are powerhouse influencers in their communities. Because when in doubt, neighbors, even if they don't have kids, will ask me what's happening with schools. So, thank you for taking the time, and we have some final thoughts from Jada.
At 8:01, I'm going to make these very quick. I just want to say thank you to both tables of all of you. Your commitment tonight to be here until 8 o'clock at night to answer questions that are important to this room shows that you're committed to the education and working together. And I cannot let this moment go without recognizing my colleagues, the educational leaders of Clackamas County, the superintendents who are sitting in this room tonight. They're the ones that put this together, planned this to be able to have this conversation. And so when I hear that you need people who are transformational, Clackamas County has transformational superintendents sitting in each one of the districts. I'm proud to be here. I also want you all to know that partnerships with the county, we have a threat assessment, both level 1 and level 2, and that is participated by every district in our county. We also participate in the positive, the PBIS. We just finished a school safety summit because the concerns they continue to have is how do we keep schools safe? What do we look about with suicide and all of those things you heard tonight? And so they celebrate diversity, and they're constantly learning together and for the betterment of kids in Clackamas County. Thank you tonight for all of you, and make sure you get a piece of cheese or a cracker on your way out. Thank you.